Hello, everyone. Welcome to Random Encounter 343 or 343. Spring is finally here, or as we call it in Canada, fall spring. It's been incredible here the last couple of days. We had temperatures up to 16 degrees. For Americans, that's 60. And it was lovely. It was so beautiful. And it does not last. It's fall spring. It does not last. We're getting below zero temperatures coming up fast. And today we got basically just like a massive a freezing cold rainstorm. There was freezing rain and everything. And so I have a bit of a headache today. This migraine-inducing pressure system is taking its toll. But you know what? It's okay because I'm loaded up on Advil and I got some tea here, so there's caffeine involved. And I am ready to talk about two incredibly interesting games. And joining us to talk about them are our returning champion, Ben.
Hello.
And Matt.
It's Matt Wardell versus the world.
When isn't it?
Oh,
well, hopefully it's versus the world and not the infinite sadness. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about. I mean, I'm not going to say what game we're talking about second because if you've read the comics, you know what those are references to. But first, we're going to talk about something a little different that has gotten a lot of buzz on the internet lately. I mean, it's been talked about since it was announced for very good reason, and that's Pokémon Pokopia. So when it first came out, we were like, Pokopia, does that utopia, sort of? And yeah, it turns out that's pretty much exactly what it was, sort of. So over the years, we've had a number of Pokemon spin-off games, like we've had on-rail shooters, adventure games, AR games like Pokemon Go. But until recently, we haven't gotten a sim, like a farm sim, life sim builder, kind of like Minecraft, even though it seems like it would be a perfect match for the series. And it turns out, yeah, it is. So, Ben, you just rolled credits on Pokopia. And before we jump into that game, I'm curious about your particular personal history with the Pokemon series. Like, what's your favorite game in the franchise, RPG or otherwise?
So
not including this, if this is indeed your new favorite game.
It's definitely up there. My history with Pokemon. I mean, Pokemon Yellow was the first game I ever played as a kid before I could even read. I was
That's
playing
formative,
it.
I would imagine.
Yes. I would just fight Pidgeys in the grass right outside of Pallet Town with Pikachu until I learned to read, and then of course finish the game and everything. But Pokemon is a very formative series for me and many a millennial that was born in the 90s. I think so.
So I'm just imagining your mother, the world of Pokemon, literally tipping like a 2-year-old or 3-year-old out into the grass to just fight Pokemon. Which is basically what the entire game is, really.
Yeah.
Time to leave the nest. You're 10 years old now.
Pretty much, yeah. But I would say my favorite Pokemon game is probably a Pokemon spinoff, which would be Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky. Because I'm a big Mystery Dungeon fan. I think I've talked about Mystery Dungeon once on Random a while back too. That would probably be my favorite in the series. And it's a good one to kind of compare to Pokopia because they have a similar theme where instead of playing a human capturing Pokemon, you are playing as a Pokemon in a world of only Pokemon. I
suspect that this particular world, we're going to get into this in a few minutes, it's slightly more ominous though.
A little. I mean, this, unlike, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, where the world is entirely Pokemon who have their own society and there's pretty much no humans at all. And you're a human who becomes a Pokemon in the Pokemon world as opposed to the human world, basically. And it doesn't seem like there's any hint of humans in the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon universe. In Pokopia, there were once humans, and that is a major, basically the plot kind of revolves around that idea that there's all these Pokemon, that they have memories of their trainers or how the world used to be, and you're kind of in the remnants of what seems like a fallen human society, and there are no humans to be found. And so you're playing as a Ditto who, has lost their trainer, and you meet Tangrowth, who used to be the Pokemon of a certain Pokemon professor. And you guys kind of are like, well, we don't really know where the humans have gone. Maybe if we explore and try to, find other Pokemon, we can figure out what happened. And so in the ruins of, the old Pokemon civilization, you kind of build a new civilization for yourself and the other Pokemon inhabitants. which is a really neat idea for a game. It is kind of dark, as you alluded to, Jono, but the game is kind of cutesy, and it's a kind of light approach, They don't dwell too much on the implications of that.
It sounds like it's like directed by Yoko Taro or something. Like it's so high concept.
It is very light-apocalyptic
Pokemon universe.
It is. I mean, it is technically post-apocalyptic, yes, but a very lighthearted take on that concept.
Thematically, this actually pairs very well with the game that I'm playing right now, the Talos Principle 2, which it's post humanity. Humans are gone, and
good game.
Okay. Well, the game itself, it has elements of like life sim. It's a city builder, town management. Obviously, lots of Minecraft in there, as well as Animal Crossing. Same dev as Dragon Quest Builders.
Yes.
So this genre is really hard, I would imagine, to pin down.
Yeah, it's a lot of things. There's elements of farming sims in here, though the farming is not very in depth. There's elements of like social sims, like Animal Crossing. The social sim aspects are actually quite similar to Animal Crossing, and even some parts of like the UI are quite similar to Animal Crossing. And then you have, of course, it's built on the foundation of Dragon Quest Builders. So where you're kind of in this area, you're kind of doing requests for the kind of inhabitants of your town. And you're kind of building out your town and places for people to live, and facilities for people to use, or well, in this case, Pokemon to use, so that you can kind of form a society. And that's the format that Dragon Quest Builders 1 and 2 take. And so Pokopia kind of takes the same basic format, just with Pokemon as opposed to Dragon Quest humans. And then it just adds. So the main way that it differs from Dragon Quest Builders is that there's no combat in Pokopia. So that was I would say the combat in Builders was very simple. And then you would have these, at the end of like chapters, those games are divided into chapters. At the end of a chapter, the monsters would come and try to like destroy your town, and you'd have to defend your town. And so that element is all gone because there's basically no violence of any kind in this game. Which I think,
utopia for Pokemon. There wouldn't be.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing to ponder, is like in the absence of human beings, Pokemon no longer fight each other. And so like, combat is a major focus of Pokemon games in general. And so to have a game without humans, meaning there's a game with no violence between Pokemon, it's kind of a heady question or concept there going on.
Because they only like level up through fighting, right? In like traditional Pokemon games, like are they still leveling or like evolving some way?
No. So there is no leveling system in this game, and there's no Pokemon evolution. There are like each stage of a Pokemon. So, for example, like early in the game, you'll attract, Bulbasaur and Charmander and Squirtle to your little town. And then later on, you can attract the evolved forms, but they are separate Pokemon. And there's no way to get your stage 1 Pokemon to evolve into a stage 2 or stage 3. They're all unique individuals, and oftentimes even the different stages of an evolutionary line will have different personalities and ways of speaking and things like that. So
cool.
A good example of that is like, and in one of the final areas, you can attract Trapinch and then Vibrava and Flygon. And they all have very different personalities from one another, which is really interesting because you would think like, oh, well, maybe they'd be similar because they're all part of the same, evolutionary family. But the personalities of the Pokemon are kind of based around their physical traits and also like typing and things like that. So, like Trapinch is very like kind of young and naive kind of sounding. And then when he evolves, or Vibrava, which is the stage 2 for that evolutionary line, is almost like robotic because it's more of like a bug-like Pokemon. I don't know how familiar you guys are with all the Pokemon, but
there's a lot of them now.
Yes. And not all the Pokemon are in this game. I don't know off the top of my head exactly how many Pokemon there are. There are quite a few. I mean, there's a lot of variety here in terms of Pokemon included from the various generations. I would say it's heavier on Kanto Pokemon, which is the first region that Pokemon was set in for Red and Blue. It's not only Kanto Pokemon, though. There are Pokemon from every single generation represented in the game, and it's not only the most popular ones. So some of the Pokemon that feature in this game are kind of obscure, and they seem to have been picked more for their like utility or their kind of how their attributes would match the environment rather than just like popularity, right? So that's something that a lot of Pokemon fans in general sometimes complain about, is that in a lot of the spin-offs, you just see the most popular Pokemon over and over and over again. Stuff like Charizard, Lucario, Greninja, the ones everybody knows, ones that are in like Smash Bros. And stuff like that.
The electric rat.
Yeah, Pikachu, of course. And of course, all the really popular ones are in this game, but there are a lot of like more obscure picks that I was happy to see that you wouldn't really, that don't really get top billing in any game. So it's cool that some of those more obscure Pokemon made the cut in this one. And so, this game is very similar to Animal Crossing. One thing that a lot of people complained about with Animal Crossing New Horizons is that they felt like the villagers were had their personalities sanded down, and like most of the villagers fall into like a handful of like archetypes. And then within those archetypes, like a lot of the characters will like repeat dialogue, or they just kind of all act the same way if they're of that certain type. And that was something that a lot of people really didn't like in New Horizons. And Pokopia does address that because there's so many different Pokemon. I wouldn't say that they're all totally unique in personality, but there's a lot more variety in types of Pokemon personality here than what you would find in New Horizons, which is nice.
Are the personalities of the Pokemon what you would expect from that particular Pokemon?
Yeah, generally. Like I was saying before, like their physical attributes and their typing play a large role into what their personality is going to be like. So like a lot of the fighting Pokemon are more like brawny, and like they're very active, or they like to show off with one another or train a lot, things like that. Or you have a lot of the electric Pokemon are, a lot of them are more like Magnemite or Magneton or Voltorb. They're a little more like machine-like or robotic in the manner of speech. You also have like the fire types are a little more like peppy and like passionate. The ghost types are a little more like brooding and mysterious. There's Pokemon that are like Gardevoir or Ninetales, for example, that are a little more like mystical and like high intelligence, and they have a more like regal bearing, or more kind of they seem much more like human than some of the other Pokemon. So yeah, there's a lot of variety there.
I know that there's not like voice acting, but like, do you get the impression that they're speaking in different accents? Like, yes. Oh, this Pokemon's British. Oh,
yeah,
really?
yeah. There's definitely a lot of different. Actually, like one funny one is early in the game. So when you progress in a certain area and do enough quests, then it'll eventually, you've built up society enough that it'll attract a legendary Pokemon. And so the first legendary Pokemon you attract in the first area is a Kyogre from Pokemon Sapphire. And Kyogre speaks with like a very thick, like Southern accent, which is really funny. Yeah.
The giant whale, like flying whale. Wow.
Yes. And that was like really surprising to me. And so they do play around with that. And I don't know if any of the localizers for this game also worked on Dragon Quest Builders, but it does feel in some ways the localization a little bit like, how Dragon Quest will like give characters like the kind of unique accents through text in the English localizations to kind of make characters stand out. There is a lot of that here. And that I think that helps make the characters feel unique and different. And I mean, there are a lot of Pokemon like, I don't know. There's hundreds. I don't know exactly how many, but I was pretty impressed with like how unique they manage to make the Pokemon feel when there's so many that you can acquire in the game.
I'm glad that we left some biodiversity after we vanished. Possibly taking a bunch of the Pokemon with us. I don't know how, but...
The human legacy is the southern accent. Yeah.
Yeah, that aspect of the game is very interesting. I'm not exactly sure. It doesn't really... There's a lot of like... So in the environments and the areas when you're exploring, there are like notes that you can find left behind by humans. And that...
Oh my God, they're going the Bethesda Fallout route.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Audio logs everywhere, tragic stories.
Yeah, so you find like text logs basically, and a lot of those will kind of, some of them are like Easter eggs or references to like the mainline Pokemon games, but some of them like kind of detail a bit of the backstory of the world and like what led the world into this scenario. And that's pretty interesting, and they're pretty worthwhile reward. Sometimes they also will come with a transformation for Ditto, so that allows you to essentially change your outfit. Because Ditto is basically mimicking the appearance of their trainer from what they remember, and this picture that is left on the Pokédex that you use. And then you can find these other outfits basically that Ditto can change into. So they're all themed after typically like gym leaders in the first Pokemon games. There's also like a Team Rocket outfit, and some of the kind of, trainer types that they have in Pokemon, the classic ones like like a karate guy, or there's also like the super nerd who you fight in Mount Moon to get one of the fossils, so you can change into his outfit with your like plaid shirt and glasses and pocket protector or whatever. So there's some rewards for doing that too. So it's not just like the backstory, but it's kind of interesting that you're kind of getting these little snippets of like left behind by humanity, and a lot of them are really funny and have some interesting writing as well.
See, I was assuming Pokopia meant utopia, but I guess it's equally possible it means dystopia, because it sounds like these Pokemon are like locked into this bizarre parody pastiche of our society where they're, especially Ditto, is like shambling along, like doing the motions that he saw the humans do. Yeah,
and there is a lot of like you as the Pokemon like recreating aspects of human society. There's one of the areas, like the major like theme of all the quests is like putting up utility poles and connecting electricity to all the structures. And so like the Pokemon are like adopting like human ways of life and commerce, for example. Like some Pokemon have this ability, like the trade attribute, where they will, if you put down a cash register and like a counter top, then they will start to barter with items, and they'll have like items there for sale, and there's no currency. You just like trade other items that you have in your inventory that have a certain value up to the value of the item that they have for sale, and then they'll trade with one another for the item. So that's like a really interesting thing that like you don't really see in the other Pokemon games, is like Pokemon acting as like merchants or other kind of human like roles, which is really interesting. You can also
vaguely horrific.
Yeah, it's really conceptually it makes you think a little bit, and I don't know if the game is really intending for that, but
they're repeating the follies of humanity. We're just watching it like all play again.
It's a cycle. It's a vicious cycle.
And you can actually, so there are some more in-depth sim elements here than just the life sim elements from Animal Crossing. So all the Pokemon have different abilities. So like they're usually tied to their typing. So for example, grass Pokemon will help crops grow or plants grow. Water Pokemon can like revitalize like parched ground, or they can remove like mud or toxic sludge from the ground. They can wash it away. Fire Pokemon can do things like if you give them clay, they can breathe fire on them to turn them into bricks. or you can build furnaces that then the fire Pokemon can operate with their like fire breath.
Yeah, you probably want to keep the Charizard away from the gardens. Something tells me he'd undo all of the hard work that the Bulbasaur and Squirtle did.
Yeah. And so you also have this like deeper level, which is almost like, like games like Factorio, for example, where you can assign Pokemon to do different tasks, and then they will complete those tasks independent of you, helping you gather resources or make materials that then you can use for building. So there is a bit of almost like a Ditto is like a taskmaster a little bit, where you're kind of directing the Pokemon to do different jobs to like help you, build out things or produce certain items or whatever, which is kind of interesting. That's
even darker, where all the Pokemon are like, I guess the one that's shaped like a human's the leader.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. No, it is kind of interesting. I mean, I think part of it too is it's like, in Animal Crossing, ever since New Leaf, like they make your character like the mayor of the town, right? And then that's what gives you the ability to like place the houses or make changes to the town or whatever. And Ditto is essentially acting in that same role. And because Ditto is the one who's going around, and I mean, the main thing that you do to attract Pokemon, I don't think I talked about this yet, but is you make habitats. So certain Pokemon will only show up if you create a certain type of habitat. And then that's how you get them to show up in your town. And so that may be like a patch of flowers for like a lot of grass type Pokemon, like flowers. Or you might have some tall grass that's shaded by a big rock, and that may attract like rock types or fighting types. So a lot of your time is spent like discovering these new habitats, which you can either stumble into just by like putting a bunch of things together, or there's these little flashing like glowing points that'll be left on the map that are called like a trace of a Pokemon. And then when you collect that, your Pokédex will then prompt you to build a certain type of habitat, and then it'll give you like a silhouette of whatever Pokemon might show up there. And then, so some habitats like will accommodate multiple different types of Pokemon. So you may have to build the same habitat multiple times if you want to get all the Pokemon that are attracted by that habitat. So because Ditto's the one who's like putting all this together, he's the one kind of bringing all the Pokemon in. And so they naturally kind of, I guess, see the Ditto as like a leader.
The kindler, gentler got to catch them all.
Yeah. So it does have that collection aspect of Pokemon, the main series Pokemon games. It's just done a little bit differently here. And then you're also, so one interesting thing is that these habitats, like Pokemon, they have like a happiness stat, and you want to build that happiness up because that raises the level of your entire town, which is similar to Animal Crossing or other life sim games. Usually have like similar mechanics, but making their habitat the way they like it is a major part of that. So part of it is like, if it's a water Pokemon, they want their habitat to be very humid or near water. But if they're like a rock type Pokemon, for example, then they want their habitat to be very dry. So if it rains, then they start to get upset. Or if a fire Pokemon is left out in the rain, they get upset, for example. The ghost type Pokemon don't like there to be a lot of light, so they want to be in an enclosed habitat typically. But you can also then build like more traditional housing structures, like human-like housing essentially. And then all Pokemon will adapt to that more human style housing, which is interesting too, that, they have these natural habitats, but you can kind of create more traditional structures, human structures for them to live in with furniture, and then they will all move in and adapt to those. And it doesn't matter what type of Pokemon they are, they all like the human habitat structures, which is a kind of a interesting implication there too, that as you progress in the game, the Pokemon start to become more and more human as your society starts to get more and more similar to what was there before.
What about like mini games, like for example, like fishing or bug catching? Like I imagine that there's not any of that here, but like let's say in Animal Crossing, you're like pressing a button to like shake a tree and pick up fruit, whereas in other like farm sim games, there might be like a mini game aspect. What are you doing in terms of like managing the town? Like, are you picking weeds? Are you
Yeah, so actually a lot of things like that are in games like Animal Crossing are here. So that example that you gave of like shaking the trees to get fruit, that is something that exists in this game. So there's a wide variety of berry trees, which is something that's true in the mainline series games as well. And then you can grow berry trees. You can get seeds for different types of berry trees and then plant them and then grow them and then get the different berries. And sometimes Pokemon will request food or they'll request a specific type of berry, and then you'll have to like grow it or find it and then give it to them. And that'll increase their like happiness. But there's also like actually unique mini games tied to certain Pokemon. So, for example, Bulbasaur is one of the earlier Pokemon you get, and if you raise your affection with him enough, then he will offer to play jump rope with you, and then that takes you to a mini game where you like jump over his vines that he's like doing as a jump rope.
Nice.
And then there's a few Pokemon that have stuff like that. Later on, there's a Zorua, who's a Pokemon from Generation 5 that has this like illusion ability where he can make himself look like any other type of Pokemon. And so then because Ditto can also transform into objects or other Pokemon, you will play like a kind of hide and seek with Zorua, where you're both disguising yourself and like trying to hide from the other one. So there's actually some unique mini games like that, that certain Pokemon will give you access to. And then, there's a wide variety of activities, other than that too. There's no fishing, I guess, cause like the implication of that would be
murder. Kidnapping.
Yeah. But, there's a lot of like, there's a lot of you do a lot of mining in the game. Actually, so this isn't something I talked about yet either, but because Ditto can transform into any Pokemon, he can also take on certain attributes of different Pokemon. So as you progress in the game, you'll become friends with certain Pokemon that will then confer on you new abilities. So like one ability is Rock Smash, and that's something taught to you by Hitmonchan. So Ditto will actually like turn his arms into punching gloves that like Hitmonchan has, and then you actually just like punch the rocks to break them up and harvest ores from them and stuff like that. Scyther will teach you how to turn your arms into the blades that Scyther has for arms, and so you can cut grass or cut wood or things like that. And then there's some more unique ones too, like you eventually get the ability to surf by turning into Lapras, or the ability to fly by turning into Dragonite. There's actually a really wide range of different like movement abilities and also like gathering abilities that Ditto gets, and that kind of separates it a little bit from something like Animal Crossing, where you don't really have that kind of stuff. You don't have that kind of freedom to engage with the world in that way. But of course, these are Pokemon, so they have more fantastical abilities, and the game does a really good job of incorporating that into the player's abilities as well.
Can we talk about construction? Because I mean, this game, there's obviously a lot of Animal Crossing. There's quite a bit of Minecraft as well, though. And I can't help but feel that there's got to be, it's Fuchsia City, right? Like when you first see it, they're literally the ruins of a place that you know very, very well, that you have to rebuild. Yeah.
So the locations are actually like based on Kanto locations. So each area in the game is a different Kanto location. I believe the first area that you're in is a combination of, there's like Fuchsia, there's also Viridian there, and then you can actually access Pallet Town. And Pallet Town is actually like a non-story kind of sandbox area where you can kind of build out the places you see fit without the kind of story aspects that exist in the other areas. Yeah, and then you let's talk about Pallet Town for a sec, because that's, like you said, open world building. So what goes into the construction mechanics of this game? You obviously there's resource gathering, crafting, stacking blocks. Like the Minecraft, you're dealing with blocks really. Mm-hmm. This is the thing that gets me is I don't think that I would. The amount of time that it would take to actually build this into an actual world, which some people do, and it's astonishing.
let me put it this way: just how does building work?
Yeah, so it actually strikes a really interesting middle ground between something like Minecraft and then something like Animal Crossing, where, Animal Crossing, like in New Horizons, you can kind of terraform the island, and then you like put down houses, but you don't really like build any of that out. And then in Minecraft, everything you can build block by block. Well, you can do both in this game. So there's like a bunch of prefabricated houses that you can set up, and then they take like a certain amount of real time to build, and the Pokemon actually build them for you. So certain Pokemon have like a builder ability, and then you'll have to assign them and some other Pokemon to work on the building. And then you come back a certain amount of time later, and then they'll build it. Usually it takes like a full day. So you'd have to come back the next day, and when you bring up the game, then they'll have built the structure. And so those, they are not like made out of blocks. They're like they take a certain amount of space, but when you go into them, then it's like an Animal Crossing house where you have like multiple floors, and they're all like, a certain amount of size, and you can just put down your furniture and stuff like that. And then there's also structures that you can build block by block. And that is much more akin to Minecraft, where you make blocks of different materials and then you stack them one on top of the other, and then you can make structures through that. And so the interesting thing about this game is that both are viable options for housing for the Pokemon and yourself. So you can make a structure, and the game will recognize if you make a structure of a certain number of blocks that's a certain amount high, and then you slap a door on it, then the game recognizes that as a house, and then you can assign Pokemon to live there. But then you can also make the prefab structures and then have Pokemon live there as well. And either one works, and there's advantages and disadvantages to both, but it kind of lets you do either way. So, and there's a lot of like items and tools to make the houses that you build out of blocks look a certain way, or like look more natural and not look as like blocky. So that's nice, but you have to do all that by hand. And then the prefabricated houses, you can just set it down, have the Pokemon build it, and then when they're done, it's ready to go, and you can just put stuff down in there. So it kind of accommodates every type of player in that way. If you don't really like building things block by block, you can treat it more like Animal Crossing and just do one of the prefab houses. But if you like to build out these crazy structures, then you can do that as well.
And you don't have to do it alone. There's a multiplayer component to this, correct?
Yes.
So you can play online with, I think, 4 players?
Yeah. And there's actually, so you can play online, and you can have people come to your like area, and just like in Animal Crossing, they come to your island, and, you can, show them around, and you can actually build structures together if you want to, which is a way it kind of differs from Animal Crossing. It doesn't really let the other players like really interact with much, but in this game, you can actually like interact with a lot of the elements. You can also like go to other people's areas and do the same thing. And then you can, I believe, I haven't done a ton of testing with the multiplayer, but I think you can actually like meet Pokemon from other people's areas that you don't have yet, and then be able to like get information to more easily bring them to your area. And then one really interesting feature that they've added here is you can take pictures with the Pokédex of anything. So you can take pictures of Pokemon, you can take pictures of items, but the really interesting thing about it is if you take pictures of items, you can actually bring them back to the Pokemon Center. So each area has a Pokemon Center that you have to build, and in the Pokemon Center is a 3D printer. And you can, using resources, print any item that you've seen and taken a picture of. So even if you haven't acquired that item yet, if you go to another player's space and they have the item, you just take a picture of it, go back and 3D print it, and then you have it in your area, which is crazy huge. I don't know if you guys play Animal Crossing, but typically you have to like wait for stuff to like show up in the shop, or somebody has to like drop it for you to take back or whatever. But here you don't have to worry about any of that. You can just like replicate it on your own using the 3D printer, which is really cool.
I was going to ask, like, similar to Animal Crossing, like, do you feel like the game caps your playtime like per day? Like they're like, okay, that's about all I can do today. Or does it let you play as much as you want, without having to wait on like the in-game clock?
Yes. So that's a really good question, Matt. I would say that it is less limiting than Animal Crossing, but that element still exists. So that was like one of the things that I found most frustrating with the game is that, like I was talking about those prefabricated houses, those do take real time to build, like real world time. And typically it takes like, you have to wait till the next day for them to actually be built. And at the beginning of the game, it's not so much of a problem because you're not doing a lot of that. But once you get further in, the game really, like a lot of the challenges are based around building structures. And, a lot of the progression for the story is also based around building structures. And then you do have to wait like real time for those. So there was a lot of times where I would like be progressing the story. And then I basically hit like a wall where I needed to wait till the next day for the thing to be done building for me to progress. Now I say that, of course, I played 40 hours of this game in like less than a week, and I did finish the story. So it's not like incredibly limiting. Animal Crossing, it could take a really long time. I mean, I remember New Horizons, like you'd be 2 weeks in and they're still doling out like basic features of the game because they would only do it every day, a certain number of days. And I think that's why people would go in and change their system clock to like try to time travel or whatever, right?
I'm like, that's a little free to play, isn't it? Sounds a little bit, sounds almost predatory if there's a system in place to fix that.
And Pokopia is not nearly as limiting because it's really only building those structures that takes real time. And like I said, you can build a lot of structures on your own, but certain things that you have to build using that are like prefabricated, you have to build, and they do take real time. So it does limit you in some ways like Animal Crossing does, but there's a lot more to do in the game. And so it doesn't feel as limiting as something like Animal Crossing. Like Animal Crossing feels like a game where you come in and it's designed for you to play like an hour a day and that's it. And like once you played for an hour, there's like nothing left for you to do. I never really felt that with Pokopia. It was just certain parts of the story I couldn't progress because I had to wait for the real time elements.
We're going to move on now to the next game, but I actually want to. There's one question I have for you left that I'm going to use to transition to the next game, and that's how is the music?
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Oh, the music is very good. So, there's a lot of like remix. Like when you're out in the world, it's like a lot of remixes of classic Pokemon songs, basically from the areas that these areas represent from the original games. But there's like little areas, and this is similar to Animal Crossing. Like in Animal Crossing, you would like dig in a spot where there's like a light shining up, and then you get a particular item. So that element is here too. And then sometimes those will be rather than furniture, like an item you can display or whatever, it will be a CD. And then you can take those CDs and put them in a CD player that you can build. And then those are just different tracks from the classic games. And those aren't remixed or anything. They're just literally the tracks. And so they're in the same quality too. So like if you're playing the Game Boy, songs from the Game Boy games, they'll be like that kind of 8-bit, chiptune soundtrack. But then if you're playing for one of the songs from the newer games, it'll be, better quality, better sound quality. But yeah, so there's a wide variety of songs you could find. I think from basically every mainline game in the series, you can find the CDs and then play them.
That's really cool. Well, thank you very much, Ben, for playing through this and like really rocketing through it too. Are you going to keep playing?
Yeah, I'm going to keep playing. I think the story, it's like the story kind of keeps you going and it feeds you different little things and teaches you how to do all of the different building and structures and stuff like that. And then once you finish that, then you're kind of like free to like create whatever you want and kind of build out whatever you want. And you don't really have to worry about the story anymore. So I think that a lot of people, even if they don't, it would take them a while probably to do the story because I played for about 40 hours. It took me about that long to do the story. But there's plenty left to do if you want to like express your creativity. And they're also doing like events. So right now, the first event is going on and they're adding new Pokemon with each event. So there'll be new items and then new Pokemon that you can attract to your areas. So I think it's going to have a lot of life to it as they add new Pokemon with the events.
Cool. Let's move on now to something else that recently came out. This is I can't even call it a long-awaited sequel just because it's okay.
Unexpected sequel.
Unexpected sequel is a good way to put it. So The reason why I mention music is because music is an inseparable part of this particular franchise. And that is Scott Pilgrim. So personally, I love Scott Pilgrim. I read the comics, like many people. I read the comics in the late 2000s. I believe the last one came out, Volume 6 came out in 2010.
Yep.
Wow. In my mind, I'm like, that came out after I met Amanda. No, that came out 3 years before I met Amanda. Yikes. But we have the comics, and we also have Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the Edgar Wright movie starring Michael Cera. And from there, we had a few more like little projects, and probably one of the best known ones for video game fans is Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game, which is considered to be one of the best beat 'em ups of this era. Not that there was a tremendous amount of competition in this era, but it's really, really good. And there was a lot of crap that went on this thing. It got discontinued. You couldn't buy it anymore. It vanished because it was digital only. It was recently reintroduced a few years ago and is available now for purchase. Amanda and I actually played it together for the first time a few weeks ago, and we had a great time with it. Pretty much follows the exact all the story beats of the first of the movie and the books, where every boss is one of the evil X's. And then, of course, there was something that came out last year.
2 years ago, I think, or 2023.
Right. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, which was a anime series that featured an alternative series of events, shall we say, to the movie in a really interesting way. I loved it. I thought it was great. So I'm a big fan of this franchise, and Matt, you are too.
I am, yeah. I wonder if the underlying thing there is like we're both, Torontonians, because
yes.
I'm wondering if Ben is a fan of Scott Pilgrim, or if you've like enjoyed any of the media from the franchise. What do you think?
Yeah, I like Scott Pilgrim. I enjoyed the film, the Edgar Wright film that came out. I read the comic books like when I was in high school, because I mean that's right around that time you were saying 2010, Jono. So that's probably when I was reading them.
Me too.
And I played the game on the PS3 when it first came out, and I really enjoyed that game. I thought it was a lot of fun. It was kind of a huge shame when it was delisted. So I thought it was cool that they were not only were they able to get it re-released, but then to make a sequel. That's not something that I ever really saw happening again. So, but Tribute, the developers are a good developer. I like a lot of the games they've made. So I am really curious, Matt, what you thought of it.
Yeah, so it's Scott Pilgrim EX, and Tribute, if you are curious, they've recently released like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Shredder's Revenge, Marvel Comic Invasion. These folks are the current champions of classic beat 'em ups, I guess you could say. So, Matt, I'm assuming you play the original as well. Before we dive into it, how does this compare to the original Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game?
Yeah, I think even though, like you said, the developers are totally different and like even the publishers are totally different, it feels like it's made to be a spiritual successor to that game. Bringing back Anamanaguchi to compose a soundtrack. Brian Lee O'Malley, the writer of the manga, is like co-writing the story here, and visually, like, it's carrying on that kind of mixture of like the manga's kind of chibi style mixed with like the 16-bit, I would say, art style. That it's a little less pixelated than the Ubisoft game, but it very much feels like a sequel to that game directly. And even like there are like little callbacks in the environment and in the soundtrack. Like, for example, one of the first songs that you run into, it's taking place in summer, and I think the song is called One More Summer, right? Which might call back to Another Winter, which is like the opening theme level in Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game. So yeah, in many ways, it feels like a lot of creative choices are meant to like echo that game. But one of the things that I really liked about the game that was totally unique and unexpected for me is that whereas the first game, like you said, it's mirroring the manga and the movie plot, you're playing as Scott, Ramona, and like the bandmates from Sex Bob-omb. You're playing as like Scott's buddies. In this game, you're rescuing Scott's buddies. So you play as Scott, Ramona, and the other 5 playable characters are like villains from the franchise. Hence the name Scott Pilgrim X, right? Like I've been calling it X because you're playing as like Gideon and Lucas Lee and I'm forgetting her name, but Roxy, the ninja girl, yeah, and one of the robots from the Japanese Twins. And I thought that was like a very unique decision that they made. I'm
That's
really glad that
clever.
they ran with that. Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
I can't be sure about this, but I'm assuming it follows the continuity of Takes Off, because in Takes Off, the evil X's don't die.
Yeah, and they say, like, they kind of gloss over it, to be honest. Like the lore implications should be bigger than they are, and that's one of the complaints I had about the game. But they do mention, like, in the character select screen, like, Gideon is like repentant, and like he's actually trying to like make amends for his, like, you know, being the antagonist of the franchise. But one of the complaints I had, one of the few complaints I had, was that it feels like they're kind of like, I wrote in my review, Mickey Mousifying the Scott Pilgrim franchise, where it's like they're kind of sapping it of its story and of its like stakes, and even like the romance between Scott and Ramona is like not really present. Like there's little interaction between the playable characters in terms of dialogue. So like the story is not the focus here, even though like the events that happen like are interesting enough that they could have fleshed it out, and like there is like a fair amount of dialogue to deliver jokes. Like the Ubisoft game had no dialogue whatsoever. This game does have written dialogue unvoiced, so I was a little disappointed that like they kind of sapped it of its story potential. Yeah,
that's an interesting choice, because the relationship between Scott and Ramona is at the heart of literally every single piece of Scott Pilgrim.
It's a romance, right? There's no romance here.
Thus far, that's interesting.
It's like Mickey and Minnie Mouse. It's like, yes, they are friends who live in separate houses and go on adventures together, right? It feels like that. And it's like, or like I wrote in my review, it's like Mario playing tennis with Bowser. It's like,
yeah,
we're not going to acknowledge this, but like now we're buddies. Okay. You know,
for those out there who have not watched really, really classic Mickey Mouse cartoons from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, there was no continuity. It was literally like one week, Mickey, Donald, and Goofy would be clock cleaners. The next week, they would be ghost hunters. Like it was literally whatever the situation is, you take Mickey Mouse, Donald, and Goofy, and you dump them into it, and they would react accordingly. And that seems to be where Scott is right now.
I think it's Julie, like the sarcastic, you know, barista played by Aubrey Plaza in the movie. She mentions at one point, like, some of us, Scott, need jobs. Like, we can't just go around beating up thugs and like picking up coins off the street, right? and Scott's reaction to that is kind of like, oh yeah. Like I love how they acknowledge that a little bit, like the magical realism is there.
Matt, it does sound like it's like a kind of a missed opportunity, though. If you're going to have them, like Scott and Ramona, partnering with the X's, like there could be a lot of like, I don't know, interaction or interesting things you could mine from that. But it seems like that's like not really much of an element to this game. Is that true?
100%. Like, I kind of wish that, like, I actually would love if they did like a sequel manga, kind of how like the original game is reflecting the manga. I want them to do the opposite and write a one-off manga, like reflecting this game's story. I think that would be quite cool. But
I think one of the problems with Scott Pilgrim at this point is that it is so intrinsically rooted in a certain place and a certain time that trying to do something else with the characters outside of that place and time becomes extremely hard while still leaving it feeling as Scott Pilgrim. And of course, that place and time is the early 2000s in Toronto. Mm-hmm. And that's where this game takes place, or more accurately, 20XDX. I gotta tell you, one of my favorite things about playing Scott Pilgrim versus the World, because I am from Toronto, it's a world-class city, but unlike other world-class cities, a lot of games and movies don't take place here. So like I can't be watching something and then be pointing at it like Leonardo DiCaprio. But when I was doing this, I was like, we're fighting on a streetcar? This is frigging awesome.
Yeah.
And they really go hard at this in this game, even more so, like loading it full of Toronto specific areas and references.
Yes. And I, obviously, like, I'm a bit biased, like, as you might be, Jono, about that aspect of it. But like, it was one of the things that I really, really loved about the game was, the backgrounds. It is such a gorgeous game. Like, you're mixing all of these like pretty deep cut Toronto references. I mean, obviously, like, you have the CN Tower in the background in like one screen maybe, but like the shops in game are places like, I'm trying not to mix up the real one with the in-game one. Tricky D's, the nacho shop, right, which is Sneaky D's in Toronto, and they have Honest X's, which is like Honest Ed's, the thrift shop that went defunct like a decade ago, but was a huge part of like a lot of Torontonians' childhoods. I feel like that iconic storefront. So there's a lot of things like that, or even like one of the major levels in the game is Castlevania, which they take Casaloma and they turn it into like a Castlevania beat 'em up stage, right? Which also mixes in other games like Bloodborne and like, the whole game is very, very reference heavy, typically to games in the 90s. Like there's a ton of Mega Man and Street Fighter DNA here.
Just as there is in the comics.
Yeah, exactly.
And everything, yeah.
That's part of the thing. It's like everyone is always, it's a love letter. I know it's such a cliche thing to say, but it's a love letter to like retro video games. And like, it feels very joyous and celebratory of that. And I'm really happy that they didn't decide to like age the characters forward and be like, what if Scott Pilgrim had a smartphone or anything like that? Like it is very much set in this place in time.
They didn't King of the Hill reboot it.
No, exactly. That's a fine reboot though, but but unneeded, right? Like unneeded here, especially. But
because I mean, the characters are very much products of the era that they were created in, and trying to remove them from that era creates some interesting. I mean, a lot of that's actually addressed in Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, specifically, actually. What happens when you grow up, essentially, and certainly grow up into this timeline. But here, it's very much out of. It's set in 20xdx, but it's out of time, and as a result of that, you can, as you say, you can Mickey Mousify it. You can just have a fun romp starring these characters that you really, really love, beating up a variety of evil villains around a cartoon version of Toronto. Yes,
and the three gangs that you'll be fighting around Toronto are. The robots, the demons, and the vegans. And I love like within those three like gangs, like they throw in so many visual references to other games. Like you'll be fighting like Mortal Kombat ninjas and you'll be fighting Mega Man robots. And it just was like, speaking of that Leonardo DiCaprio like pointing GIF, it's like that constantly of just like, oh, like that's 100% like a Resident Evil reference or a Castlevania reference or a Zelda reference. Like there's a lot of love packed into the game. But it doesn't feel like overly winking at any point, despite all that. Like there's very few moments where I'm like rolling my eyes like, okay, I get it. It's a reference. Like it's just done so seamlessly and so like joyfully again in the world. So I did love that aspect.
Matt, I want to ask you about the gameplay mechanics. Like I know that the first Scott Pilgrim game wasn't really in RPG fans coverage because even though it has some like River City Ransom elements to it, like action adventure kind of elements to it, it wasn't like really an RPG. Does this go heavier on the RPG mechanics and like kind of add more complexity or depth?
Yeah, Matt, why are we covering this?
The original Scott Pilgrim beat 'em up, it's like any other belt scroller of the era or like the recent like Ninja Turtles game, like Shredder's Revenge, like you mentioned, where you had to play through each level like linearly, left to right. And there are like 7 levels in a row. You fight a boss at the end of each level, like any beat 'em up from like the last 30, 40 years, right?
Mm-hmm. You've been navigating around basically a Super Mario World-esque screen to pick your levels.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the Toronto overworld. But in that game, you were leveling up each character, and kind of annoyingly, you were basically required to replay levels in order to like get the next level. Like you'd have to beat
many times
the first level like 2 or 3 times in order to be high enough level to beat level 2, and so on.
I constantly go back to it too to buy items and
the
buy
grinding kind of thing.
Yes, that's right. The hidden shop. And there's some of that here, but like the biggest change about this game, which I'm glad that they did this. It really differentiates it from that Ubisoft game is it's open world and there is no like level structure. So what that means is, each direction in the Toronto overworld has like maybe like 3 or 4 screens. Like it doesn't take that long. You can run end to end of the city in under a minute, I would say,
so pretty much just like the real Toronto.
Yeah, with the TTC, I don't think so. But
that joke made Torontonians happy. Any Torontonian listener to this was like, haha, yeah, take that.
But as like a consequence of that, you are like constantly backtracking where like there are story quests where like characters will be like, hey, like I forgot my Game Gear, like basically like, or like, can you go pick it up at my house? And you run back there and then like they're kind of sending you on. It's more interesting than fetch quests, but that's essentially what it is.
A staple of any RPG, fetch quests.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's right.
Why is this an RPG? There are fetch quests. Okay, checks out. Sure, okay.
I know it's like the worst part of RPGs, but it's interesting too, like the structure, because one of the things that I was also annoyed by is I love in like in any beat 'em up, like, oh, that was a fun level. I'm going to replay that to beef up my character, right? To grind on that fun level. This one, you beat like a certain direction and you beat like a scripted boss event, and you can't replay that unless you like do a new game plus and restart from the beginning.
That's weird.
I thought that was quite annoying. And actually, like when I beat the game, the final boss is pretty cool, not that difficult. I beat it, and as I'm watching the final cutscene, the game crashed. It's the only time the game crashed on me.
Oh no!
And when I booted it up again, it wouldn't let me replay the boss, so I couldn't see the proper ending. I had to YouTube the ending.
Man!
So I had to replay it in order to see the ending, like legit. And so I found that whole structure kind of annoying, especially because at any time you can go to, I think it's Scott's house, or it might be like Steven Still's house, or one of the characters' houses, and switch between the 7 characters. There's really no need to do that though if you're playing solo, because by the end, I played through Scott the first time, and by the end of the game, I was level 300 with Scott, which is like the max level, and that doesn't really require any grinding, but like it kind of makes me not want to pick up another character, because Toronto, the open world, levels with your highest level character.
Oh,
so like I would step outside as like level 1 Gideon to give him a shot, and then I'd have a bunch of vegans jump me and kick my ass in like the streets of Alberta Avenue, right?
Yeah, but to be fair, that guy.
That's true.
Do the characters have like different builds, or like do they do different things from one another?
They do that. I mean, like every beat 'em up, like characters feel a little bit different, but this game they feel very different. Like Roxy, they all have like their own class names. Like Roxy is the ninja, Lucas Lee is the wrestler, the big bulky like slow character. And I'd say it's like closer to something like Streets of Rage, but even more so, like there are a lot of buttons, which I love. I mean, recent beat 'em ups like
so it's almost like Dragon's Crown a little bit in that way.
In a way, yeah. Or like it's closer to like Streets of Rage 4, I would say, where it's like fighting game level controls, where like you can block, you can roll, you can dodge. There are special moves, like multiple special moves. Scott can do like a guile flash kick, like anti-air attacks like that. Which is interesting because, like, speaking of the RPG elements, in the original Scott Pilgrim game, you had to level up to unlock moves. This game, you have all the moves available right from the start. So it's
just your stat building.
Exactly. And the way that you build stats is by buying items from the shop. So basically you're beating up thugs, you're picking up loonies and toonies and other coins off the ground, and you're spending them in like real world parallel shops to, like a hamburger to boost your stamina, or a vegan protein shake to boost your willpower, like mana bar, that kind of thing.
Boost? sorry, vegans. The first Scott Pilgrim game was a really, and I think it actually might be one of the first beat 'em ups to do this. It was one of the first to really kind of combine RPG progression style, stat building, leveling up, equipment with just classic beat 'em up. Since then, it's kind of become old hat. I'm really glad that they've advanced that a little bit. I am a little sorry that you don't get to get new moves with each level.
Yeah, I felt that way. And honestly, like whereas in that Scott Pilgrim Ubisoft game, you feel the difference between level 1 and I think level 16 was the max level. You feel the difference. Like you move so fast, you throw items so hard. There's a little less of that feeling here. Like you're not too different from level 1 to level 300, which is weird to say.
One of the last things I wanted to ask you about before we dive into the soundtrack, because I know you want to talk about the soundtrack a little bit, and for very good reason, was that the game does have online multiplayer, cooperative multiplayer, and certainly better than it was, back in the old days. You mentioned the problem with power scaling, where one enemy is, or where one playable character is more powerful than the other. If you do go into cooperative multiplayer, how does the game do? Does it balance it, or if you're just starting out, are you just incredibly overwhelmed by the strength of your opponents?
That's a great question, and it is the latter. But I will say that, like, having played Scott Pilgrim a million times on PS3 and then the PS4 remake, the online in those games is terrible and like unplayable, right? Disappointingly. This game, buttery smooth online. Like I loved how smooth it was. It's very drop in, drop out. So you go to join a stranger online, and one complaint is that you can't see like where they are. Like you can't see what story quest they're on out of 12, which would help with like the power scaling maybe. But you join their game, you drop in, you can watch them, you can drop out at any time. And yeah, like for example, I go, okay, I'm done with Scott. I want to play as Roxy, for example. I jump in as level 1, and the guy there is like level 250. And so all the vegans beating me up in the street are level 250, essentially. So you do have to kind of get carried a little bit. And really the only benefit of helping other people is to like level up your own characters, right? Without having to start like a new game plus. So it's all for the fun of the game. Like, you know, like I said, like the level difference isn't huge there. But a notable thing too that I forgot to mention is that this game doesn't have a life system. So if you're playing solo and you die, you get a game over and you go back to like a Sonic the Hedgehog looking checkpoint post, which makes it more strategic, but also like less beat 'em up feeling of just like, you know, if you're playing with a buddy, you can revive each other, you can steal each other's health points, you can throw a heart to each other or a coin to each other. But yeah, it is definitely like a different strategy involved in that way. And so when you're playing online, it's like, you know, you might be dying a lot on later levels if you happen to jump into a later level.
Okay, let's talk about the music. Because like I said, music is probably, aside from video games, music is one of the most important aspects of Scott Pilgrim, not at the very least because he's in a band. The original movie, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, had some amazing songs in it. Threshold, for example, by Sex Bomb. I think Metric's Black Sheep is probably the song that really comes to mind. But then they went a different direction with the video game. And they were like, okay, we're doing a video game. Let's do you know, video game music essentially. And tell me about the soundtrack to this game.
Yeah, I was in love with Anamanaguchi when I was in high school, and like I was so happy that they were doing the soundtrack for the original Scott Pilgrim game, and I was equally happy to see them return for this game. I mean, they did work on the soundtrack of the anime a few years ago.
Yeah, they did. They returned for it,
and that was very much like out of their wheelhouse. Like they have like outside of video games, they've been pushing their sound in very different places over the last like decade. Including like their album last year is like just a straight up garage rock album with vocals even. Yeah. It's like they moved into the American Football House. They like bought the American Football House, moved in there, and then wrote an album over the summer, which is pretty cool. But yeah, this game returns to like the classic Anamanaguchi and classic Scott Pilgrim sound, I feel like, but also in many ways it reflects like the open world structure of the game. Whereas instead of having like a 3 or 4 minute long level theme for each of the whatever 7 levels, here you have like basically a new 1 minute theme for every screen. So, you know, the music flows together like a medley practically, and it just jumps right into the melody. Every time you get into a new screen, it's like jumping right into the new sound. And there's a, you know, diversity of genres there. Like there's like classic chiptune stuff. There's a lot of Genesis sounding music in this game for the first time. There is like Super Nintendo. There is classic Nintendo music. There is rock heavy tracks. There are ambient tracks. There's a lot more diversity to reflect like what Anamanaguchi has been doing outside of Scott Pilgrim. So I loved that. You know, and there's obviously some like more jokey tracks in there. Like I think more than the first game, it sounds like to me Undertale or Deltarune. I got that vibe a lot, which I know people love those soundtracks too. So, I mean, that's only a good thing.
At this point, Anamanaguchi, and the reason why they asked them to do the music for Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, they've really become the sound of Scott Pilgrim. I think when most people think about Scott Pilgrim, that their music is generally what comes to mind, if not a specific song, just that kind of the chiptune sound. Mm-hmm. I'm really glad they brought them back for this game, and I'm really glad that you get new music by them. Yeah. And like I said, like there are callbacks. Like if you're looking for like a new version of Another Winter, it's right there when you step out Scott's door. But like there's also like a lot of new things to discover, and like the amount of care that they put into the game. Like you can tell like they really love working with like the Scott Pilgrim universe, because there are many shops in the game. Like there's probably like
7 or 8 shops, and each of them have their own theme. And it's like, wow, like I'm only going to be like looking in the shop for like 15 seconds, but they bothered to compose like a 1 minute long track for each of them. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I really want to play this, and I will. There's no doubt in my mind I'm going to end up playing this because, I mean, it's not just that it's a property that I really like. It also harkens back to when I was in my early 20s in Toronto. Like like I was growing up as an adult in Toronto, reading these comics that took place in Toronto in that specific time. So it really does trigger a sense of nostalgia in a way that few things do. Just the fact that like Honest Ed or Honest X's is in this game, for example, is just, it really does make me go, oh, wow, that's really, really cool. I mean, the thing I've been saying lately is if you live in Toronto, you have to come to terms with everything that you love will eventually be replaced by condos. And I have an odd feeling, like Honest Ed's, condos. And I have a feeling that going back here and playing this is going to bring me back to a time that I really, really, really loved. Not just in terms of Toronto also, but in terms of video games. So I'm pretty excited to play it. And I'm really glad you enjoyed it.
My main takeaway from it was like I put the game down and I was like smiling the whole time playing it. And I felt like, man, I love video games, was like the feeling that I had. So yeah, it definitely brings that feeling back. Like even if you haven't lived in Toronto, even if you don't love Anamanaguchi, like there's still a lot to love in this game.
Yeah, it really does hit a lot of boxes in terms of the graphics, the music, hitting some RPG mechanics. It feels very much, well, like home in a lot of ways, I would imagine. Well, you know, Honest Ed's was known for it was a cathedral of commerce. It was surrounded by things like there's no place on earth. You can buy anything here. And we have our own version of Honest Ed's called the RPG Fan Shop. And you can find it at www.rpgfan.com/shop. And much like Honest Ed's, you can find all kinds of stuff inside there. You can find mugs, you can find t-shirts, clothes, hoodies. And I really recommend heading in there. I'm pretty sure that Mike is not going to sell rpgfan.com/shop to be replaced by condos, but you never know. So head over there as fast as you possibly can. God, I missed Honest Ed's. I don't even miss the store. I just miss walking by it and be like, yep, that's a place that it feels like Toronto. Another way you can support us here at RPG Fan is by listening to all of our podcasts. Now you're listening to Random Encounter right now. Last week, Bob was here to chat about the sequel to Paranormasight, The Seven Mysteries of Hojo, Paranormasight, The Mermaid's Curse. And Ben, like I said, you're a returning champion. You were here and shared your thoughts about the 2D Zelda-like Under the Island.
Yeah.
We also have a Retro Encounter. And if anyone out there is listening to this, you're listening to Random Encounter, so you probably like boss fights. Well, in the last episode of Retro, our panel was chatting about the best final boss fights in our favorite RPGs. And Matt, I believe you were on this one?
I was, yeah. It was a small trio.
Small trio of warriors against all the bosses.
Small trio of big hearts.
Yeah, fighting the bosses with the power of friendship. And we also have Rhythm Encounter. Like I said in the last episode, it's the beginning of the year. Things are usually up in the air trying to figure out basically what's to come. So there hasn't been a new episode in a few weeks, but that's okay because you can check out the last episode, which is the best video game music of 2025. And there was a lot of great video game music in 2025. So absolutely listen to that. If you'd like to get in contact with us here at Random Encounter, you can fire us off a message at podcast@rpgfan.com. I would love to hear from you. If you have any ideas for future episodes, discussion questions, thoughts about some of the games we talk about, fire them off. If you'd like to send me an email, you can do so at my email, jlogan@rpgfan.com. And you can also find me at johnologan.bsky.social on Blue Sky. Ben, where can we find you online?
Yeah, you can email me at benloganlove@gmail.com.
Cool. And Matt?
You can read my fiction writing at mattwardellwrites.wordpress.com.
Cool. If you enjoyed this podcast, please, you can help us get the word out there by reviewing us on iTunes, your other podcast players of choice. If you want to write a review, I would love to read it. Ben and Matt, thank you very much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate you playing through these games.
Yeah, it was my pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jono. It's always a pleasure.
Lovely. And it's always a pleasure to have everyone out there listen. And whatever you are playing, have fun.